us this evening. Tonight, I am joined by the wonderful Tara Rhodes, and we are going to be talking about the journey to motherhood. Such a deep topic for all us mothers out there. And Tara joining us this evening is a coach for TaraRhodes.ca. And I also call her, like every other mother out there, the CEO mom, right? So Tara, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting and nerve-wracking
all at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, motherhood is such a personal thing, right?
It is. It really is. It is. And there's no right or wrong to it. So, you've already started off the show like it's such a personal thing. It's so nerve-wracking. So yeah, let's get to it. The journey of motherhood. You are the mother of two handsome young guys, and they are so cute and doing a fabulous job raising them. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And how has it shaped you? How has it changed your life?
Oh my gosh. So my oldest, he's turning 7 this month. And first of all, I can't even believe it's been 7 years.
7 years.
Yesterday I was thinking, I remember pacing the floor. I remember pacing, trying to get them to sleep, like being so tired. And it's just gone by so fast. I think the way that it has shaped me is I slowed down. I slowed down, and where do I even begin with that? So
well, it's funny because you slow down and then I think to myself, I just speed up.
I slowed down. I had a lot of my identity wrapped up in my work, and it's still very important to me. So I'm very much a career person. I enjoy having things to do. I enjoy building things. I enjoy being parts of teams. I've loved all my work that I've ever done. And motherhood, I couldn't solve it, right? Wow. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't, just even the difference between both of my kids, the thing that worked for my first did not work with my second, right, and vice versa. So I had to slow down to really pay attention to patterns, and it made me pause, which I'm grateful for. It's made me a better coach, actually, I would say, being more empathetic, being more, okay, so it's not just about me, having a wider view of that. Not to say that I was selfish, but definitely focused on my goals, what I wanted to achieve. And yeah, it's so funny. Now, if anyone's ever done a personality test or like Myers-Briggs or anything like that, completely shifted. Like I flipped. And it makes me laugh because people think those things are very like, this is how you are for the rest of your life.
Right.
But it's not. And I think that was the thing that shocked me the most, was just how much it changed me. Not the core of who I am, but how I wanted to show up in the world and the impact that I wanted to have. Because the thing that I think of now, as my oldest, like I said, is almost 7, I'm raising a man. I'm raising someone who, well, both of them, but it's like, I want them to be responsible men out there who now it's like, with Me Too and all of these things, it's like, you have to be thinking about much more than I think when we were being raised. And that's important to me. And how do we want to show up? How do I want them to show up? And that every action that I take, they're watching me. And I know a lot of people don't care about that. Like a lot of people go through the world and just like, okay, well, whatever. I took that so seriously from day one.
Right. And I can resonate with that. Well, I remember looking down, my kids are very close in age. They're about a year and a half apart. And I remember looking at and I used to hold them in each arm because they both needed me. Right. And I remember looking at them thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm responsible for 2 human beings. Like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to be instilling in them? What is it going to look like? And I remember feeling it like this huge sense of responsibility, but taking it seriously. Like, oh my gosh, like, okay. And I remember thinking, but I don't know what that looks like.
It's so true. And you can't plan for it.
Right.
You can plan for all the, like, how much money are we going to have every month? Or like, the little, they're not little, but things that are easy to plan.
Yes.
You cannot plan that we're going to be in a pandemic in 2020 and my kids are going to be home for 3 months, 6 months, and I don't know what I'm going to do with that.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because there really is no manual in parenting.
Oh,
And it's I think I don't know about anybody else, but I know that there's many times where you go into it with the greatest intentions and then it really backfires and you see it through their personalities and you just, it's just like this is not the way it was supposed to be. And then you lay in bed at night and you're like, do I cry? Do I beat myself up? Like which or all of the above you're doing.
well, I mean, isn't that the spectrum? We go from here to here or somewhere in between all the things.
Yes. And then you're like, what was I thinking?
Well, you're reminding me of the early days. So my friend, there was a girl that I went to prenatal class with. We met during prenatal class and our kids are 3 weeks apart. And we used to text each other at 2 a.m. because we didn't know what we were doing, of course. And it's like,
Yes.
is this supposed to be happening? Are you up right now? Those types of things. And we used to text each other. You made the right decision given the information you were given at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that mantra was so important for me because it was just like, okay, keep moving, one step forward,
Right.
and they're alive and they're breathing. So we did something right.
Right. And it's funny, like when you say that, it reminds me of like, taking it one day at a time because you really don't know what you're waking up to the next morning.
No.
Like you put them to bed tonight and you think this is the way it's going to go tomorrow. You're sadly mistaken. It's not
honestly,
like that.
honestly. And for me, I didn't want to have kids. That was not on my to-do list at all.
Right.
I had this belief that it was like, if it's a gift that I'm given, I'll take it. If not, I'm not going to cry about it. Like it was,
Right.
I could have gone either way.
Right.
And my husband and I, we were married for about 5 years. So we were enjoying the travel when we want and do all of that. And we had a blast. And I'm so glad we waited. Like it was such a good thing because I didn't end up feeling like I missed something. Like we had all the fun and it was great. But I was still very nervous when I became pregnant. I was just like, what? Grateful, but what, how? And it actually ended up being bad timing for me because that was actually when I was finishing my coach certification. So I was starting a new career. And then in the middle of certification, I found out and I was like, oh, okay.
What's that saying? When you make plans, what God's laughing or
something like that.
Something to the effect. Well, that's what it reminds me of, right? You had your plan, right? And God was busy laughing.
Yeah, and it took me a while to get into it because it wasn't the wishing and the hoping that so many women want. For me, it was learned.
Right. And how did you move through that?
Oh, one day at a time. Like I remember coming home from the hospital and being like I didn't have that deep, like, oh my gosh, I love this child. That so many people, that wasn't me. It took me, it's like, oh, well, that's an interesting feeling. And I felt affection and I felt like, oh, this is my child. Like it wasn't, but it took me a while to be like, this is like, our bond is unshakable. And this is my firstborn son and all of that. It took me a really long time to be comfortable with the being at home and having nothing to do. What I mean by that is the same routine where I'm not focused on me, I'm focused on another little human being.
And there's no stimulation too if you're coming from something, because you were saying you were career oriented, you were constantly being challenged from a different spectrum, and now that's not happening, right?
Yeah. So all day it's like, and he's obviously December, so cold. We weren't going for walks. We weren't any of that. I was sitting on my couch and sitting with him doing stuff on tummy and all of that stuff. But it was boring for me. Like it was really hard to be like, oh, this is worth it. This is worth my time. This is all of that.
And there's a lot of women that feel exactly the way you did in the very beginning. I've spoken to a lot of women, and that is their experience from nursing. They just said nursing wasn't my thing. And they lived with a lot of guilt because they were wondering what was wrong with them. Why, and there was like nothing wrong with you. Like everybody is born differently, right?
And I think that was a struggle for me. I didn't have friends in my age group who were having kids. I was actually first. And so there was nobody that I knew that was going through the same thing. And when I would talk to my mom, like, well-intentioned, and I love my mom, but a different time, like she had to go back to work in 3 months. She, like it was just a different way of looking at how to raise kids. So
Right.
it felt isolating to be like, you don't get it. It's different. And so well-intentioned. And so helpful too. Like
Right.
her,
Right.
I would not have, I don't know what I would have done, but it felt really lonely and isolating at the time. And I had to really figure out what I wanted my support system to look like.
So what did that look like? How did you end up developing?
Oh, it ended up taking so long. Actually, I would say in the first 2 years, it still wasn't clicking for me. So I went to the baby and music classes, and I went to all of those things, but just did not connect with people in the way that I wanted to. And for me, what I found was a lot of the women I would meet were actually stay-at-home moms. And no, not knocking any stay-at-home mom, good for you. And actually, I think your job is 1,000 times harder than us who have to actually go and do other things. But it's just like, I still wanted to work. I still had this desire to talk about life. I did not want to talk about my kids. I was like, I talk about them all the time. I want to talk about me and my dreams. And I think that's just a coaching habit type of thing. Like, right. I always want to talk about.
That's why you're a coach, right?
Exactly. I wanted to talk about the news. I wanted to talk about other things, not just my kids. And so I found it, I had a really hard time finding people that I could converse with and really feel like we had a connection.
Right. And, it's interesting that you had that experience there, because I'm connecting it to it from a whole other opposite end, where I had that other experience where life made sense. And, I walked out of a corporate job because I just wanted to stay at home. And I wanted to be that person that I was just mindless. And, just life stood still for me for that moment. It was busy, here it was with 2 small kids, but and then when I went out, I had friends that went back to work after 6 months. And at the time we could have stayed home for a year or 18 months. And it was like, what do you mean you're going back after 6 months? Like, what are you talking about? And I nursed for 3.5 years combined, because my kids were back to back. And people thought I was nuts and I was crazy. And, I had a girlfriend that went back after 9 months. And I was just like, so I felt like you did, isolated from a whole other spectrum, because I was like, I couldn't imagine, at 6 months getting up and saying, all right, see you later.
Well, it's such a secret, isn't it? I mean, you never even know what to ask. You don't know you never know what you're walking into.
Right.
People just tell you it's hard. Enjoy your sleep while it lasts. Like, you're going to enjoy every minute, like those types of things that aren't really helpful because you don't know. And then you're in it and it's like, well, should my breast be looking like this? And should I feel, and there's so many women who deal with postpartum depression because they don't know to ask for help. They don't even know that this is a problem.
Right.
And we feel so isolated, I think, in different ways, for sure.
And my greatest advice to women, that would ask me, like, how did you do it? And I always said to them, look, as a woman, you were born with the greatest gifts in having children, and that's intuition. Follow your instincts. I said, because everybody's experiences are theirs.
Yeah.
And, sometimes people are well-intentioned, but, their advice is unsolicited. And really, we got to spend a little bit more time asking questions and cluing into possibly what the individual requires. And I think leaning more on teaching women, supporting each other to trust our mother instincts and knowing what's right for us. Because you recognize that it didn't feel right for you. And you're wondering, okay, well, why? If they're having that experience, why isn't that me? Well, because that's not you.
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because now I do leadership coaching as well, and I train in leadership. And women are taught at a very young age to ignore that voice.
Mm-hmm.
very young, to just be like, oh, you're not supposed to feel that way. Be more of a boss. Like all of those things that are very masculine type energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see it all every day where it's like women are second guessing themselves all the time, myself included. So
Oh,
I'm
I'm
not
with you.
exempt.
I'm with you. It's a constant because we're taught to second guess
Yeah.
our natural intuitive decisions. And with parenting, like it's one of those things that even me, I'm teaching, especially as women. I have female children. And, I tell my girls all the time, you've got your dad with one opinion, your mom with one opinion. We're both in your head. You're confused. You don't know which way to go. The best way to go is pretend the door's closed, the lights are off, nobody's looking, nobody can have an opinion but you. What will that look like? And run with it. And we support you. And
Totally.
I've watched my daughters make decisions based on that, and it worked out for them because they trusted their intuition. And we gave them that platform to trust that.
Amazing. So I need to take notes from you.
I'm not sure about all that. I'm not, I have teenagers. So teenagers comes with a whole different flavor.
I'm not ready for that.
Teenagers.
Not ready.
So yeah. So let's just get, so you found that, what did you learn about yourself through that process of motherhood?
Oh, in the early stages, it was, I'm not wrong. So there was a trust that came with, these people aren't vibing for me. I'm not the problem. And they're not the problem either, but it's okay.
Yes.
There's a difference. I also learned how to, I don't know, so the one thing that I'm just so proud of, and this is actually before we even get into all of this, is I had my children with no epidural, and that was on. I made that decision. I was like, I want to breastfeed, and they say that if you have an epidural, like sometimes they come out drowsy, and so I was like, nope, I'm gonna do it. No stuff, and I did, and I was just so proud. Like it really, because if you had met me before my kids or before I had them, my pain tolerance is like
yes.
this. And after having them, I'm like, oh, I can do anything. Like I remember
I'm gonna trust that your labor was like very short because
well, it was, I don't advise it. Okay. But I'm more like, I was proud that I stick to my guns, and the birth plan went according to plan, thank goodness, because we know that doesn't happen for everybody. And like it was just kind of, oh, I can do anything. Like I remember after that, and with my second, I remember, so my second was born on Christmas Day, so Christmas surprise, and I was sitting there and I'm holding him and he's feeding, and I look at my husband and I'm like, so what are we going to achieve next year? Like, what are we going to do? Like, I was so like, we can do anything. What do we want to do?
Right. Because you just delivered 2 children, no epidural. And I'm laughing because you're still in coaching mode. Like, what are we doing? What are the possibilities? What are our goals? And I'm sitting here breastfeeding my newborn baby and I'm already making plans. That's
and
funny.
You can picture my husband's face being like, what the heck are you talking about? But I felt like Superwoman.
Yes. It's true. You know what? It reminds me of like motherhood, what it does to you. And I don't know how you feel, but a lot of women, we talk about this, but there's something that happens to us. We gain a strength when we become mothers, where we become these big protectors, and we become these mama bears that, you can say anything about anybody in my family, but talk about my children. And it's a whole, like I become a whole different person when it comes to my children.
Yeah. I'm learning that now in school, of how to advocate for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a new thing for me. And what I mean by that is, so another thing that I learned through being a mother is every single issue that you've ever had gets magnified when you have children. Right. So if you've
Amen to that.
Oh my gosh, therapy. If you've ever heard of like attachment theory and all of these things. It's like, you know, the person that you're most attached to as a child, and the way that that relationship happens will determine how you look at relationships for the rest of your life, and all these types, which I didn't learn before. Like, this is very, very recent. But I look at so many things that I issue with. And for me, assertiveness has always been a challenge for me, because I looked at it as being rude. So that was the way that I was raised. Like, and anyone who has like a Caribbean background understands that, like, you don't question, like, you don't, that's not a thing that you do.
Right.
And so
You're obedient. Let's say that.
yeah.
You're obedient.
Yeah. And so I've had a challenge with being assertive throughout my whole life. And now having to advocate for my children and be the squeaky wheel is such a challenge for me.
Even now, you're saying?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's easier now, but I find that those old patterns still sometimes come up, where it's like, am I being annoying? And like, add the layer of a woman of color to that.
Yeah.
And having sons who are Black, it's a challenge to be
it's like
oh,
almost
the
like
way
you
that
want to
you're
play
looking.
timid, and you want to kind of
You don't want to blow it out of proportion.
Right.
Even though it wouldn't be.
Oh, I was so the opposite. Oh my gosh. Well, just because I felt that, you know, you're talking about, yes, especially being a Caribbean background, West Indian parents, growing up in that culture where you're obedient. Mind you, I wasn't necessarily the most obedient child either. So I guess that helped a little bit. But I just kind of I always felt bullied and attacked my whole life. So I remember thinking that I wasn't going to allow that to happen to my children. And I was going to be that voice for them, to the point that it kind of went a little bit of an opposite direction for me, which I had to pull back with my girls, because they were just like, my mom will just, you wait till my mom finds out. You wait till my mom finds out. So it's kind of like I had this reputation all of a sudden to fulfill, that if they came home, I remember my daughter being in school and something had happened to her with a pair of scissors and a child. And she told me maybe a half an hour after coming home. And that instinct in me was like, what? And who was around? And did you tell anybody? And she was like, I told the supply teacher. And I'm like, the supply teacher didn't. And I carted her back in that car, drove that car back to the school. And I didn't care. It was after school, and I didn't care who was around, but somebody was going to, if I had to call the superintendent or city TV or whoever I was calling.
It's so important now, for sure, to do that. And it's a challenge, but something I've had to step into.
Right.
Even more so, because I mean, parenthood doesn't wait. You got to do it all the time.
Right. And it was about teaching them, you know, how to be assertive. When you talk about that, it's like, so you're not passing that on to them. It's, well, we can still be assertive, get our point across, be polite, you know, and sometimes it isn't going to be nice, and that's okay, because sometimes you just can't be nice about, you know, be about it. But it's allowing them to see that it's okay.
Yeah, being direct is okay.
I think there's a difference. I think we confuse it sometimes with the aggression, being aggressive and being assertive. Where I always tell my kids, it's okay to be assertive. Being aggressive, not so much.
Yeah.
So yeah. So any other other nuggets of
what's another thing? So I went back to work when my second was 10 months old, and my kids are 2 years apart. And I remember struggling with that. Like, it was DUI, because I was headhunted at the time. And so I had no intention of going back right away or anything like that. I struggled, but everything fell into place. Like, daycare fell into place. Just, you know, I mean, for those of you who live in Toronto, finding daycare spots are really, really hard. And so the fact that we basically called and there was 2 spots was just, that doesn't happen. And I actually, at working, I'm a better mother. I'm a better mother, because
it's important to recognize that.
Yeah, I'm feeding me. And
Mhm.
I know some people have trouble with that, but what I found is um, focusing on yourself. It's the oxygen mask metaphor.
Yeah,
Can't put oxygen in other people if you haven't put the mask on yourself. And
right.
when they were younger, I wouldn't say I had trouble with it. It was how do I find it? How can I
Right.
still have these pieces of myself when everything is needed of me all the time? Um, but yeah, I'm a better mother when I work. I can compartmentalize better. I schedule my life better. When my computer's off after work, I'm with my kids. Like I put my phone down, those types of things. So it's really helped me in terms of, okay, this is how much time I have to give to this. This is how much time I have to give to this, and schedule my life better. And when they were younger, I actually want to highlight this, and this is from my prenatal coach. So she said, give your partner a task. So
Mm.
for example, bath time. Bath time is like their thing. And we did that from day one. It was the best advice ever because I knew that I would get at least 30 minutes to myself.
Have you time?
And to this day, that's their thing. They do bath
It's
time.
we don't. I think as mothers, we don't do enough of that. Where we take on so much as mothers.
Yeah.
Um, we do the grocery shopping, just the basic things. We manage the teachers, the schoolwork. We just take it all on, and it is the oxygen mask. There is no oxygen mask in sight. If somebody made a comment to me today, and I thought it was a very powerful statement, is then we wonder when our children aren't treating us well, we taught them that we don't matter because we've taken
Mhm.
everything on. And I thought that was a very powerful statement. So it's important so kudos to you for taking the advice from your prenatal instructor that you figured it out from the word go that there is an oxygen mask available to you and I'm going to put it on.
Mhm. And we designed that. So that was a small thing at the beginning, small but big. And then we started to design um, how I could get more time. My husband worked far away. He had to drive really far. And so when he would come home, like we would talk about, okay, I'm passing them now, or we're doing a shift, or he needed time and space. So it was very much an open conversation
Mm-hmm.
because it was important that I could do that. And as soon as they were old enough, and it was comfortable for him to be with them, like I would go out with my friends, or I would do that and still have the one-on-one time. And it was such a life-giving thing for me because I didn't get a lot of value in the kid play date thing because I'm
Right.
not paying attention to my friend.
Right.
Well, we're having although those are great when you're home, right? It's fabulous, but it wasn't giving me what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as we were comfortable enough, because I breastfed for a really long time as well, and so when we felt comfortable, then it was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this
I'm
now.
going. Right.
And but we talked about it. It's ongoing.
That
And
communication piece is huge because I think a lot of times as mothers we take on so much from the onset and then we we already came into it not feeling like we had a voice and then now as you talk about it it's amplified now we're moms
yeah,
and it's amplified we don't have a voice and we've got all this stuff and then we're looking at our spouses and we're resentful because why aren't you and I'm like well you never said anything to anybody you took it on like you were like the strong woman and
yeah.
you weren't as strong as you thought you were.
And let it go. Honestly, if you have help, take it.
Yes.
Like just take it. If somebody is offering and they're genuinely offering you help, and just take it because it does take a village. And I know our villages look different than it did for maybe our parents or our grandparents. And we have to kind of recreate what that looks like.
Yes.
But it's so important. I did a webinar the other day on, this unforgiving role of motherhood. And
Mm.
there's a lot of people who feel overlooked by this because they're single parents or they just don't have a lot of support. So maybe they've moved to a city without their family or that type of thing. Be intentional about creating your support system. It's not just going to happen. It
Mm-hmm.
really is not just going to happen. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to be intentional about who you want around your child to raise them with you.
Yes, that's huge. Same values, same. Just,
Yeah.
I always said if I couldn't, my one prayer to God was, if there comes a point in my life where my children can't come to me for advice, then send somebody that's a grown up that they feel comfortable with, that have the same values that I have for my
Mm-hmm.
family, so that they're giving the same advice I would give, just through them, not through me.
Oh,
You know.
totally. So
And
important.
so I agree with that whole village, and be intentional of who you're choosing to be a part of that village and helping raise your children.
And you can change your mind.
Yes.
So just because they were good at this age doesn't mean that they're good at this age. And you don't have to just yank everybody out. But communication is so important when you are a parent,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have those conversations with teachers, with other family members, with all of that kind of stuff.
Those are difficult conversations, though.
Oh, of course. I remember for me, I had my mom's a nurse and she's lovely. The hardest thing that I had to tell her was I don't want her in the room with me when I
Right.
was giving birth. That was the hardest conversation I had to have with my mother. And it doesn't get easier. Like I'd love to say that conversations like that get easier, but you do get more comfortable with having to give hard or having to say hard things.
Right. Set those boundaries and be true to who you are. Right.
Yeah, but it's important. And I love that you say like be true to who you are, because for me, I was like, we're starting a new family. Me and my husband.
Yes.
That's our thing. It's our experience to have.
Mm-hmm.
And it was important that he have that. And it was important that we have that. And so it's like, unfortunately, you're not a part of that.
Right. Yes. It's a tough one. It's very, and it's all personal. So anybody listening in, again, you have to do what's right for you. And I totally, support the whole village theme. I have a group of moms, and we always put in our group chat, it takes a village. I think one of them is on right now. A couple of them are on right now. We've got Beverly Gonzalez. We have Pat Lewis. We have Effie. We have Marcia. It takes a village. It really takes a village to raise our children. And without some key players in my life, I wouldn't be here in this moment in the capacity that I am.
Oh, completely.
So
completely.
It's interesting that you talk about, there's a lot of my girlfriends back in the beginning stages of when my children were smaller, like around your children's age.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my girls being back in kindergarten, and I had girlfriends that had gone back to work 3 years prior. And again, just like you, it came to me. I remember walking down the stairs at my home. I was starting my career, like going out on my own, doing my thing. And it just wasn't, every startup, it doesn't work out the way you want it to.
Of course not. Yeah.
So it just kind of, I just started to more relish in the fact that I'm a stay home, and I'm coming down the stairs and I get a phone call, and would you like to come back to work for the company? And
Of course.
Well, I said no at first. I said, you do realize I've been out of the industry for over 7 years. And they're like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. And I thought, okay, let me think about this. I said to my husband, okay, they want me to come back to work. And like yourself, the childcare worked itself out. And I went back, and on the 8th month, I resigned. I said, kudos to all you mothers out there that are working and taking care of small children, because I couldn't do it. And the straw that broke the camel's back for me was realizing that I was spending more money on takeout food than I was for groceries for my house, just being so busy.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's something wrong with this picture for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, and there's not everybody's in a position to say, hey, I'm resigning. So I recognize that as well. My point is, I have every bit of respect for women that can balance the full-time working life and managing their family. That wasn't me.
And kudos to you for knowing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's important, like you said at the beginning, trust your intuition on these things.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can come back to those values, or come back to that vision that you had, or the things that are really important,
mm-hmm.
it actually makes decision making a lot easier. if you have those things clear.
Right. It does. Like for me, it was important for me to do the sit down. Now, like my children are older teenagers, they're going into their young adult years in their 20s. So dinner's, every man's game. But in
Yeah.
those younger years, it was important for me to have those sit down dinners.
Mm-hmm.
And it was modeled off of one of my aunts who had demonstrated what those family values look like for me. Um, and it was important for me to do that. And working a job, it didn't allow me to do that. It didn't give me that sort of time to have that relaxed quality time. It was rushed. It was,
Oh
I
my
just,
gosh. I can't even, I like going back to February, like let's not even go back, just February. I don't even know how I would go back to the rush.
mm-hmm,
If this pandemic gave me anything, it's space. And
mm-hmm.
how much I love space. And how much of a struggle it is. Like I haven't even figured this out yet because we haven't had to go back to the swimming and the skating and
Right.
all the things. But I love having him do martial arts on Zoom. I love that I don't have to move. It's wonderful. And we can still have dinner and nobody's rushing and everybody, it's
You get
wonderful.
to breathe.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so hard. And I think this pressure right now, and I've talked to so many parents who feel this, where it's just like, but what jobs will they have if they're not
Right.
doing these things, and what will, and it's really hard. It's really, really hard to also have them make friends, because that's where they make friends a lot of the time, is
Their
in
social
those
skills are
extracurricular activities.
right. The social
Um,
skills are developed.
and you don't want to take that away from them either. So it's a struggle. Like that one I haven't figured out yet.
And you're in the company of many of us out there, including the teenagers, including the young adults. There's so many restrictions, and there's so many. You've got to be in your bubble. You've got to be this, and
Yeah.
So it is really challenging. I hats off to you moms that are managing, because I even talked to some of my girlfriends who have small children and they're working from home. They're on Zoom. They're trying, like, they're working to teach their kids online while they're managing being on a Zoom call, and they're juggling. And I'm not sure which one's worse or better, being out of the home, pre-pandemic, and being in that rush with the activities and the this or that, or being at home and working to balance two desks next to you with iPads and computers set up while you're on your Zoom, right? So I'm not sure which one.
I wish I knew. It's like we have no idea how this is going to shake out.
Right.
And I know we have not been big on screens. Like it was never a thing that we wanted for our kids. And so this has been a struggle, because not only were they now online for school, they had to learn how to navigate it, because we weren't big on tablets, and we weren't big on them using our computers for things like that.
Now I feel old, right?
But we struggled.
Like
we definitely struggled with that. I'll say for us, we decided to let it go. So we're like, mental health, number one.
Mm-hmm.
You can always learn how to do math, and you can always learn how to read, and we can actually help facilitate those things. We were way more concerned with, are you all okay? Right. How are you feeling? Get outside. Luckily, we have a backyard. I know not everybody has that, but they could just go and be together. And thankfully, they're close enough in age and they get along that they did that while we were working. So,
and that's important, right? And it's nice too, because there's ways for us to get creative with it, especially, I mean, I know my kids are older, but I'm just thinking to myself, I'm sure there's ways to get creative where you start to divvy up and give everybody a role, where you guys know it's 10 to 10, just like school, 10 to 10:15, you can go outside and play, come back, because I believe that they do get time off in between that, but it gives them a sense of ownership and pride, and that they're taking something, they're responsible for something. And you'll see what happens with individuals when you give them a task and they have to own it. You'll be surprised how these kids rise up.
Oh my gosh.
They do.
Ownership and accountability only works if you choose to it. Like if you choose it.
Right. So I know that we had a private conversation, and I really liked the fact that you spoke about mothers. We don't give enough, and we talked about it initially in this conversation about us not giving ourselves enough time for self care. And I know you talk about this
Ooh,
oxygen mask,
yes.
and I know we spoke offline, and I really like the way that you put it, and I just want you to touch upon it more for our audience.
Sure.
Is it doesn't have to look like a massage or going to the spa.
Yes. So this is a question that I get a lot in my coaching practice and in general. Um, what is self care? And if you are huge into social media and you're on Instagram, uh, it can feel like I'm doing it wrong, depending on who you're following. I follow a lot of like self care, self love people. So it can feel like you're doing it wrong. And even me, who does this really well, it's like, oh, I should be doing that or I should be doing that. As soon as self care becomes a to do list item, you are doing it wrong. It should be life giving. It should be life affirming. It should be putting something into you that's energizing. So if you are watching TV and you're feeling drained after you're done, that wasn't self care. But if you watch something that you're being intentional about and it's like something that you really enjoy and you're like, that was a good use of my time, then that is self care. So you want to be like, it doesn't have to look like the spa. It doesn't have to be, okay, I'm putting like a mud mask on and cucumbers on my eyes and all of that. Although if that's what you love, kudos to you.
Oh, I was gonna say, because that's my me time. They want to know what the hell I could be doing in the bathroom for 2 hours, and I'm like, yeah, I've got a peel mask on.
And that's my preferred choice. Like if it was up to me, I'd be at St. Anne's for like 2 nights. Um, but if you don't have that, and especially for those of you who've got really young ones and you don't have the time, call a friend,
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes, text a friend, anything that's just small, even just, um, having a snack that is like something that you love, like you're not going overboard, but something that's really like, oh, this is something for me, with that intention though, because it starts to get dangerous when you're just doing things because you're stuffing your face or
Right. Well,
and I'm an emotional eater, so
how many of us can attest to that? And it's funny because what comes to my mind when we're saying all this is I remember, and I'm sure so many mothers out there can relate to this moment. And I remember my children being little, and I thinking to myself, I just want to pee. Can I pee by myself in peace? Please, guys, all I want to do is pee in peace.
Can I honestly share? So my thing was taking a shower every day.
Yeah.
that was it. It didn't matter what time. But for me, it was like taking a shower every day because I don't feel awake until I have a shower.
Yes.
So that was the thing. I was like,
right.
As long as I have a shower, I won today.
Right. You're
right.
And
but
it's just finding those, you're right, finding those things that replenish you. So
yeah.
it's the self-care is finding those things that replenish who you are.
And I let go of a clean house.
Mm-hmm.
But having everything clean. Like we're not tripping over things in our house, but especially when they were little, it was just like, okay, what is good and enough for right now? And we focused on that. And then as they got older, meal planning came into the picture. And then things like that, like I could keep adding on. You can keep adding on as you get more space and you get more time. And you can also
start to figure it out as you're going along too, because it's all trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
I know that for me in the beginning, in the chaos of it all, I remember having so many toys in my house because it was filling a void. That's a whole other topic of filling that void. And my 18-month-old sitting in a diaper shirt and a diaper with her soother in her mouth, spinning with her little afro. And she was spinning and like she looked confused. And I remember thinking, little girl, you have every toy that you can think of. How could you possibly be spinning? And it was my biggest lesson. And I think I decluttered about 80% of what was in my house. My husband was livid. My mother-in-law thought I was crazy because, I literally got rid of 80% of what was in my house. And my life was so much more peaceful.
Oh my gosh. such a huge lesson for me too. And the thing is people don't really know what to buy you when you're a new parent, or just a parent in general. It's like toys, and I can't stand it. I can't stand anything that makes noise, anything that is loud or has lights. Like, just don't.
Well, because we're already crazy in our minds in that moment.
Oh.
Enough to make us crazy.
Yeah, some of the best things that I've ever gotten were just meals, meals and a phone call, and things that are practical, like wipes or that kind of stuff. But the toys, I'm like, I wish I could turn on my camera. I won't turn around my computer, but you'll see like the mess. And it's just like, how did all of this get into my home? They don't need it. And generally, and what I mean by that is generally, like, they don't play with it. Like, if your kids are playing with the stuff and it's useful and it's helping their mind, then please, by all means, go ahead.
Right.
My kids love to draw. My kids love the block thing, but the other stuff, not so much.
Mine, I think they like to model off. They like to model off of us, because I found mine in the kitchen, and I just remember one day thinking, okay, forget it. I'm just going to let you destroy the kitchen. And when you talk about the mess, not think about it. And when you talk about letting go of things like the house being clean, that journey into motherhood was letting go of all of that. The everything had to be perfect. It was like, all right, make a mess of the kitchen, just explore. But then you would see their creativity come to life, and you would see them happy. Or if water spilled, I learned not to get angry and annoyed over a glass of water spilling. It was just like, okay, the water spilled. Let's just clean it up.
Gosh, yeah. It's patience, right? I listened to this wonderful podcast. So Brene Brown, if anyone is a fan of hers, on her Dare to Lead podcast, she actually interviewed Barack Obama. It's her latest episode. And he starts talking about Michelle and their partnership and how they kind of navigated it for him to become president and all of that. And he mentioned something that was such an aha moment for me, which is Michelle had these preconceived notions about the type of mother that she wanted to be. But the difference was, like, she was basing it on her mother, who was a stay-at-home mother and was there 24/7. And so she would feel like she wasn't living up to what she knew, but she had a full-time demanding job. And how it's just, that will cause you to go crazy. Like, it'll cause you to be so upset with yourself, and you'll constantly think that you're not enough. And being able to figure out what you want to let go, being able to figure out what you want to invite in, being able to figure out who's going to be that support around you. And he also mentioned how, like, having her mother around was such a big help when the kids were younger and those types of things. So it does look different for everybody.
It does.
But I would love for everyone who's listening, like, challenge what you think you're supposed to look like, and really just own what you want it to look like.
And that's key. And I think that comes down to your value system, understanding your value system, what's important to you, in the sense that I remember feeling bad, like, when I would listen to my girlfriends like yourself that wanted the careers. For me, I knew that I was comfortable with that simplified cookie cutter life of nap time was at 2:00, lunchtime was at 11:30. If they got up so early, so lunchtime, snack time. Like, I was very comfortable with that cookie cutter routine. My mom, who I love and adore, I remember, and my sister would come over to my house, and they would laugh at me because it had to be complete silence. During nap time, the phone ringers were all off. There was no TV. There was no loud music. It was just, you could hear a pin drop in my house, because I was convinced that they needed to rest in peace. They needed to have that restorative sleep. And everybody was like, that's crazy. They need to learn how to adapt and adjust. And it just didn't feel right for me. And I think it was a reflection of me. I couldn't handle the noise. So I just figured that they couldn't handle the noise either. So, like, when you're talking about the toys, I don't need any with the lights and the music and the this going on,
Oh my gosh, I'll never do that to any other mother. I refuse to buy those choice for anybody.
Right. So it's just, this journey into motherhood, there is no right or wrong. I really believe that you just have to understand what's important to you, understand your value system. I agree with you that intentionally understand who you want to enroll in that village, and trust your intuition, trust all of that.
So important. I think I'm constantly thinking about that every day. And, starting new chapters is like they're old enough. They're in a stage where they don't need me as much. Like we're starting to go down that path. And you have to constantly ask yourself, like, so what does this require of me now? And how do I want to show up now? And what does that mean? Because what I decided 7 years ago doesn't fly necessarily.
Right.
Right? Or you get thrown something that you completely didn't expect and you have to shift and you have to move. But making sure, if you can make these decisions in a quicker way because well, this is the criteria and this is the criteria and this is the criteria, then it's not so hard.
Right.
Not to say you won't spend time thinking about it, but it can be a lot easier.
When you take it back to what you said in the onset of the show, which was different personalities of our children, that was huge for me because all of a sudden my newborn napped at a different time than my younger one. And I was like, wait a second, why aren't you both napping at the same time? And even fast forwarding at them to being older children now, you're constantly, when you talk about adjusting, you're constantly, like, I remember I'd walk through the door or they would come home from school, and whatever happened at school, you now had to manage them and manage two different personalities.
Yep.
And you had to approach them differently. And it takes a lot of energy to do that.
Well, you know what? It's so funny. I mean, my family. So
Yes.
The benefit of having two older brothers and I have a younger sister, and we're so different. Like all of us are so different. It actually helped prepare me for my kids because
Okay.
we're all so different. So like my sister and I are complete opposites. Like for example, she's a night owl. I cannot stay up past a certain hour, like those types of things. And so when I saw, the differences in my kids, it was like, oh, right, that's normal.
Okay.
And I could compare it to my own family and be like, there's nothing wrong with her. There's nothing wrong with him. We just look at the world in a different way. And it actually helps me appreciate the relationships with my siblings. Like, oh, right. Okay, I don't have to judge you anymore.
Thank you. Thank you for preparing. Right. And I had the complete opposite. I was like, it took me a while to grasp that they were different individuals, because I'm simplified. I'm like, okay, there's, 7 days in a week. You don't have to have 21 pair of pants. It was like, I'm very like, okay, structured and I compartmentalize everything. And so it was like, all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's not a cookie cutter. It's not going to work for you either. Oh, I've got to adjust. What does that look like? And as moms, we're learning, especially being in the whole personal development world, we're working on ourselves. So now we're managing these new discoveries as women with ourselves. Now we're managing these children. We're still wives. We still have our husband. It was like, what hat do I have on? Okay,
so many roles.
Right? I'm like, how come nobody gave me the Emmy Award for the acting either? Because then you got to turn on your game face when you're out there. And I mean, I'm not suggesting anybody turn on a game face, because I say to people, this is who I am, this is how I come, and that's it. But it's interesting. That's all.
It is.
But it's fun. I on the flip side, gosh, what I haven't stressed enough, and I don't know how you feel about this, motherhood has been such a fun adventure for me. It has been such an honor. I personally enjoy being a mom. I think it is it is the greatest gift, honor that I've been given, to be trusted with these two individuals. That to this day, my children, again, one's moving. She's in her last year of her teens.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel the same way today that I did when I carried her. It was it being just such an honor and a big responsibility. And I'm sure when I'm a grandma, for any grandma out there, I'm sure they can say as moms, motherhood doesn't stop. Right? So for any grandma out there that wants to write into me, I'm sure motherhood does not stop.
No. And you know, you're so blessed. That's such a beautiful thing. And it's a gift that not everybody's given. And it's important for me to, I don't take that lightly.
Right.
And one of the best pieces of advice, because I remember I was struggling, I was pregnant with my second, and I was not a happy camper. Like it was just like, ugh, like I have a toddler and feeling like crap and all of that. And I was just so like, why me? Like I remember being like, this is so hard. Like, why did I do this? It's so ridiculous. And this woman was a friend of mine. She said, well, do you think that God has a plan for your life? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, then this is the plan. So what are you going to do with it?
Right.
It shifted my perspective. It really shifted my perspective from like, this is happening to me, woe is me, victimhood. It's like,
Right.
this was part of a bigger thing, bigger than me.
You've been given this for a reason, and there's something
Yeah.
for you to do with your children.
And I know so many people who have had miscarriages, who can't have kids, who have adopted kids, who like runs the gamut of all the things.
Right.
And so not everyone gets this wonderful gift of being able to have your own children.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't take that as like, oh, it was just like an accident that I didn't prepare for or anything like that. Like, not at all. It is probably for me like one of the highest callings that you can do in your life. This is not for the faint of heart.
No, and I completely agree with that. And people used to say to me like, "How do you describe it like that?" And I said, "Because that's how I feel. Like I feel honored and I feel very grateful." So I'm with you. I stand by you, and you don't take it lightly. Even my daughter being 19, I'm like, I do not take it lightly, even though you're 19.
Yep.
There is until I close my eyes, this is it.
It's true.
And it feels great. I love it. So we're wrapping up. We're concluding our show. Any one last little nugget that you got just before we close off?
Own your approach.
I like
Own
that.
it. Own it. Be the mother that you want to be and create a life around you that supports it.
I love that. That is, nothing more needs to be said than that. Tara, thank you for joining us this evening. If you want to visit Tara's website at tararoads.ca, please feel free to do so. Please join us on Wednesday, where we will be having Teresa Simpatico teaching us how to meditate. That'll be another grounding show. So thank you. If you're looking for a breakthrough conversation, please visit TanyaRicketts.com. That's going to help you clear the path and get you to the next level for your life. You will find out how you can do that at TanyaRicketts.com. Again, I look forward to seeing everybody again on Wednesday. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tara, thank you for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. That was a lot of fun.
Yes. And good night, and we'll see everybody soon. Good night.